on paper, it makes very little sense. But being in that person's head inside that dark house, waiting to do something that is life shattering and life altering for you and for the person you're about to hurt and the other people in the house. God knows what that feels like. You could sit there for an hour psyching yourself up, you know?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to True Crime Unsolved. I'm Miles Reed from here, as always, with my buddy Sean Cahill. This is the place where we tackle the stories that the TV networks won't touch. Guys, it's Monday. You know what time it is. It's time to get into some comments. We're going to have a little back and forth with you guys. First off, Sean, is there any channel business that we need to discuss?
Well, Miles, actually, there is some big channel news, and that is the long awaited launch of our member section on YouTube. So, guys, we're keeping it cheap. It's only $4.99. If you want to help out this channel, this is the best way you can do it right now. Basically, we're going to add a lot of perks to this as time goes on. We want to put lives in the members only area where we can chat live with you guys, take questions live. We want to do supplemental case materials like maps and maybe documents, things from the crime scenes that would be of interest to somebody looking into the case. And probably bonus interviews are going to be coming there too. You know, interviews with experts related to one case, things that are not necessarily, you don't have to have this to understand the case. Like we would never put families or cops or anything like that behind the paywall, but maybe some supplemental stuff would make sense. And the goal here really is to help us just grow the channel. If you appreciate the mission of this channel, which is to platform people who need answers in unsolved cases, and you think that the work Miles and I specifically are doing here is helpful to that goal, then this is the best way to help us do what we're trying to do. This is huge for us. No pressure, guys. Obviously, we understand if you can't do it or you don't think it's worth it, that's totally fine. But if you do, we tried to keep it as cheap as possible. I think I got a Starbucks today that was more expensive than the True Crime Unsolved members members only circle. So keep that in mind.
Also, don't forget, guys, we are an audio podcast. I know we always bring this up, but it is true. If you don't want to watch us and you want just a break from our faces and you just want to listen to these, if you want to dig back into our backlog, you're on the road, you're driving, you're on the train, whatever you're doing, you're taking a jog, you want to listen to some Sean and Miles analyzing some cases, you want to hear some interviews, go to Apple Podcasts, go to Amazon Music, go to Apple, anywhere where you get your podcast, we're there, True Crime Unsolved.
Yeah.
So having said that, should we get into some comments, Sean?
Yeah, we started off the Austin Conu case coverage last week. We've put up the case breakdown, and of course, we're going to continue into interviews with Austin's parents and his brother-in-law, and possibly more down the road as well. The conversations are continuing to go around that case. So most of these Miles are probably from that video, I think, although possibly
Correct.
from some
But
others.
I wanted to start off with one that's not.
Okay.
And this is actually a comment that was left on a Chance Engelbert video. I believe it was one of the interviews that we did with Ryan Couch, our friend, the Engelbert family private investigator. And this is from Sakura Asran Art. Love your screen name. I am so glad I decided to check out this channel after hearing about you guys on Lore Lodge. So well researched with these in-depth interviews. Amazing work you all are doing. Heart, heart, heart. Sakura, thank you. And also, thank you for letting us know that Lore Lodge was acknowledging the work that we've done on the Chance Engelbert case, because we actually went and we checked out some of the stuff that he's doing, and it was really, really nice to see that. So shout out to Lore Lodge. Shout out to everyone that's coming over here from there, and helping drive traffic to us, and just listen, just being acknowledged for the work that we're doing, and knowing that we're having some impact on the community and the true crime community at large, and obviously, the Chance Engelbert coverage, and the fact that people are noticing all the interviews that we've done, and the access that we've gotten, and the research that we've done on the case. It really means a lot. So thank you so much for that comment, and thanks for letting us know, because to be honest, we didn't even know that Laura Lodge had mentioned us. So that was pretty cool to see. So we'll see. Maybe there's a collab in our future. Maybe we'll be reaching out to Laura Lodge and say what's up.
Yeah, I have to say I watched that episode that Lore Lodge did on Chance Engelbert, and it was interesting to see his analysis of our interviews with Ryan Couch and with Don and his take on the case, because he also pulled in some other podcasts like The Vanished, and really it was a great video where he kind of like just in totality took all this different information and digested it. And so if you guys haven't checked it out, head over to Lore Lodge and watch it. I think he did a really good job keeping Chance's story alive. And in a way, I felt like, we've done a lot on that case. We've made a lot of videos and a lot of comment reacts covering Chance. And it was cool to see that we were able to kind of set a fire and step back, and other people are now like throwing logs on that fire, right? Like just because we're
Yeah,
covering other cases right now, it doesn't mean Chance's name is not being spoken and talked about and
right.
people stop caring. So I thought that was really cool. And I did want to shout
Yeah,
out
no, it's awesome. It's awesome to see our interviews being used as a resource, like him diving into those and
the
like
best
like you
possible
said,
purpose. Yeah.
yeah, analyzing them, pulling info out, talking about it, comparing it to other podcasts. It's really pretty amazing.
Yep, very proud of it. I'll read this next one. So this is from the Austin Conu case breakdown. So this is Connor Altier 7081. Connor says, "I love how much you guys spend focusing on Austin. I feel like a lot of true crime focuses too much on the killer or law enforcement, not the people most affected." Yeah, thank you for noticing that. I think it's a natural byproduct of us spending so much time talking to the families of the missing or the murdered in these cases, and it really makes an impression on Miles and I. Um, like we really feel like we get to know these people, these missing people or these murdered people, because we spend so much time talking about them and learning about them from their family. And it's important to us that you guys get a sense of who they were and why they were important beyond just like, oh, this is some person who something really unfortunate happened to and an interesting story took place. It's way more than that, right? That's not the purpose of this channel, isn't to tell interesting stories. It's to help humanize victims and get help. So thanks for noticing that. It really means a lot to us when people leave that kind of a comment, because we do consciously try to, make our content like that.
Absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, nobody's going to care to keep a story alive and to keep fighting for justice on it if they don't care about the victim, right? So
Yeah.
humanizing the victim, platforming their families, that's what always keeps people interested, and that's what keeps the momentum going on trying to find answers, right? It's just, if it's a cool story and we're retelling a cool story, that's great. I appreciate all that. A lot of people do that. But I think elevating the families, the investigators, the people who are actually involved, talking about the victim, that's what's going to keep people interested, and that's what's going to keep people wanting justice, right? Because if you care about the person, then you're going to want there to be answers.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think one of the biggest tragedies too, Miles, would be, and I think about this a lot when I watch true crime in general, whether it's TV or podcasts or whatever. One of the biggest tragedies I can imagine happening to a person is living some full life where they touch all the people around them. Maybe they're a parent, maybe they're a beloved child or a spouse, and having all of that ultimately reduced to something horrible that happened one day. Someone killed them or they disappeared. And now their entire existence is defined by this one event. That would really suck, frankly, I think, for any of us to think about everything you've done in your life boiled down to one unfortunate event at the end of it. So it's
right, right,
important, not to let it become that when we tell these stories.
right. Well, yeah, you want them to have a legacy, not the killer to have a legacy.
Right on.
I'll kind of leave it at that. Um, Jennifer Stewart, 9762 says, "My daughter is in school with his girls. His ex has a lot of resentment. This whole thing is so sad." It is really sad. I agree. That's interesting. We're starting to get comments from people who are right there, which seems to
Hmm.
always happen. As far as Jennifer, what you said about Austin's ex having resentment, yeah, it's hard to comment on that without knowing more details about exactly what your perspective is there or what kind of conversations you've had with her. But, that's interesting.
Well, it's
You want to
interesting
take
that
this?
that reputation has made its way through a classroom and back to other parents. So something must be going on where people are talking about that, because it sounds like, Jennifer, you don't know this woman personally. You've heard through the grapevine, if I'm interpreting this correctly. So, we'll take that for what it's worth. But thank you for commenting and letting us know. This is the kind of thing that's great about local people, by the way, watching our stuff, is there's often context that we can't get on our own from like the local perspective. And this is a perfect example of it. Interesting to know.
Absolutely. You want to take this next one?
Sure, Lori Clarkson. What's up, Lori? I recognize your name. Lori Clarkson says, reminds me of other cases. One was a cock-blocked teen that hated the girl's father because he'd come home from work and he caught the boy in the house and kicked him out. Oh boy, being a teenager is so
I
hard.
think I know the case she's talking about.
Yeah,
Heard
it
about
sounds a
that.
little familiar. She says, then other cases where the teen girl had a boyfriend the dad didn't like, so they plotted to kill the dad. Then one where the girl pulled a Gypsy Rose, right? Got a boy to kill her dad for her.
We almost covered that on a show we did, a TV
Yeah,
show.
I remember that story. I wonder about the wife's past. Any disgruntled exes? How old were the teens? Were they expected to babysit? Did they want to move? I think the best context or light I could shed on this is that according to Austin's family, he had an awesome relationship with his daughters, and they really loved him. He was like a classic, girl dad, as they say nowadays. Really loved them, spent a lot of time with them, and got along. And in fact, one of the big things is that he was awarded primary custody because he fought hard to be in their lives and to be the primary caregiver. And he was given that by the courts. Like they took a look at the situation and said, "Yeah, you're the guy for that." And so the girls, from what we're told, were pretty happy with him. I don't know anything about, whether they were dating somebody or anything like that, but that is not a line of thought that came up in our conversations with the family, or that it sounds like the detective has told them anything about that. As far as disgruntled exes, haven't heard anything about Mary's past relationships, but we do know that Austin had a troubled, relationship with his ex-wife because of this divorce and because of this custody. Again, we don't know that that means anything necessarily, but as far as your specific question, that's the only ex in this situation that we're even aware of. So
Yeah,
it could be that there's another one, but we don't know.
right. KG Penguin. What's
All
up,
right.
KG? Thanks for the comment. I wonder if the ex-wife was having to pay him child support on top of Austin having custody. Another reason to want him out of the way. Retaliation and revenge are the basis of plenty of murders. Also, if their bedroom was as dark as most bedrooms, they had to know which side of the bed he slept on, indicating familiarity. Hmm.
Hmm.
That's really interesting. I am picking up on a theme of people sort of honing in on Austin's ex. I
Hmm.
have to acknowledge that because it's been like three comments.
Yeah, it does seem to be coming up.
So that's really interesting about the bedroom. I hadn't even thought of that. I mean, I don't know what the exact layout was, like where the door was, and Boston was sleeping on the side door is at inside. Usually the man will sleep on the door side. At least that's what I always do. But that is a really interesting observation, KG, because it does seem, from everything that we know about this, that the perpetrator, whoever it was, did get into that bedroom and murder Austin, knowing where he was and with Mary on the other side of the bed. So
Yeah, it is interesting. And we talked in our case breakdown too about just like, was that person in that house before? Did they know how to get to the bedroom? Did they know how to get in and out? Did they know where the vulnerable point of entry would be? It definitely raises a lot of questions when someone's able to pull off a murder like this about how much inside knowledge they might have beforehand. It's a
yeah,
little, it's not difficult to imagine, but it would be very daring for somebody to break into a house they had no idea what the layout was and attempt to pull off a murder this brazen and up close and personal, like blind in the dark, never having been there before. It's
yeah.
totally possible, but it is like, almost wow, that person has a lot of balls if they're going to do that.
Well, and
Regarding the, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, Sean, it kind of connects with the bike too. Like, what an odd way to make an entrance and a getaway, right?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, you had to be pretty confident in knowing where you were going and that you were going to get out of there in time to literally ride a bike, right? So,
Yeah, it does. It seems almost like I'm willing to just stroll up to this heinous crime and commit it and stroll away, right? Most people would be
mhm,
like, if I'm going to stab someone to death in their home, I want to get into the fastest car I can and get as far from there as quickly as
right.
possible. So it is so interesting, to think about that element of this case. The other
Which we
thing,
see all the time. You see people with a driver jumping
Mhm.
out, doing it, leaving the car idling,
Yeah,
parking and jumping out. Liz Barraza,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
like literally rolling up on a bike and rolling off on a bike and knowing
Mhm.
exactly where to go and doing it in the dark. These are all really interesting points.
Yeah, and to answer the first part of your question, KG, I wonder if the ex-wife was having to pay child support. She was ordered to pay Austin some child support in that arrangement. We have heard that those payments did not always arrive when they were supposed to. Again, it's not what we've dove into here isn't really the case of Austin's divorce from his ex-wife, so we don't know every piece of information about that, but we have heard that.
You want to take this next comment?
Yeah. So Christina, 4018. What's up, Christina? She says, could it be a customer Austin sold a car to and felt, whether rightly or wrongly, ripped off? Possibly a younger family member did the hit. The bike could cut through and get away from the area on side roads with no cameras. Much more difficult to track as no registration plates as long as you get away before anyone realized what occurred. Very sad. I think you're right on about the purpose of the bike. I think that this person used a bike because there's no license plate, there's no make and model that's easy to discern, like in cases, God, Missy Beavers, Liz Barraza, even without the license plate, we're looking at these cars wondering, okay, it's this type of car. Who has that type of car? But a bike is just a bike. And when you look at the video, it's like that could be any bike. You can't even tell what color it is. So you're right about that. As far as a customer, I mean, yeah, I think we all thought that too, right? You look at someone's business place as well as their relationships, in and out of social circles and husbands and wives. But I will say, from what we've been told, they weren't able to dig anything up as far as friction at work. So is it possible out of the many, many people that Austin sold a car to over the years, somebody, you know, had a recall notice that made them really mad and came back later looking for him? I guess it's possible, but I will say we are not getting the impression at our channel that that is the direction this investigation is headed at all. It seems like they looked there and we basically came up with nothing. So
Right.
good thought, but yeah,
But again, anything's possible, right?
totally.
Could be a road rage incident that Austin forgot about. It could be a guy that felt like he did him wrong at work. Could be anything right now. We don't know.
Your guess is as good as ours. Exactly. So
Yeah.
thank you for that comment.
Ruru 8392. Hi, Ruru. Appreciate you as always. This one is so hard to wrap my mind around. Obviously targeted, but why? And this person on a bike is bizarre. I wonder if they parked somewhere and rode the bike in. It does look like a teenager, maybe, which makes it even harder to understand. And why an hour there? None of it makes any sense. Yeah, these are all really good points. So let's kind of break them down. So obviously targeted, completely agree. I don't think there's any way this wasn't a targeted murder. I you know, if you disagree, jump in, leave us a comment, let us know why. Comment on this comment video. Person on the bike is bizarre. Agreed. I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that they knew exactly where they were and they knew where they had to get to, and that they were able to get there on a bike confidently in the time that was needed to get away from a murder scene, right? And if that meant, cutting through rough terrain, whatever, they had a route in mind and they were familiar with where they were and they were close enough to where they had to get that they were confident that they could do that on two wheels without an engine, right? Let's be really explicit about it. I wonder if they parked somewhere and rode the bike in. I that's it's an interesting thought, but why? Like, why do that? Just to like throw off the cameras, maybe? Like you park the car somewhere else and then you get out and then you ride the bike over and then the camera sees someone on a bike. But then somewhere there would
My
probably be a camera with an SUV with someone pulling a bike out of it, or it's
right.
on the back of a car and they pull it off. There'd be probably something of that too.
Well, my thought on that would
So
be that, like, what if somebody actually lived really far from Austin's house, but they wanted to make it appear that they were closer and that they were able to ride a bike there? So it's like if I drive in 2 hours and pull a bike out of a van and then ride it in on camera, maybe the police will have no clue that I came from so far
yeah.
away and they won't be looking there. That's that because that makes some degree of sense. But then you're right too, Miles. I mean, everyone's got a ring cam or some version of it these days. And so where are you parking this van? How are you doing? I mean, it's so hard to
We
know.
know we have footage of the person on the bike going both ways. So, and there's probably more footage that hasn't been released, right?
Yeah,
Because
and we
the cops waited a minute before they released the footage that they did have. So, my guess is that if there was footage of someone taking that bike off a rack from a car or truck or whatever and getting on it, there's probably something of that too, or at least of that vehicle with the bike driving at some point. So
yeah, and
I
we
think
do
I
know the
think the
last
investigators would put two and two together on that.
totally, and we do know the last neighborhood that the bike turned into, right? And
Yes, and we could
where it
show the
was.
map again, just so
Yeah,
you
so you
guys
can
know.
see they kind of like crossed a major street and went down into a whole other neighborhood, and that's where the bike disappears. So did the bike
Yeah,
disappear because the person either lives there or knows somebody else who lives in that area that where they were able to go, or was that where the van was parked? If we're going with that theory, we don't know
Right.
because it disappears into that neighborhood. So yeah.
Ruru, it does look like a teenager, maybe, which makes it even harder to understand. Yeah, or a slight human, like perhaps a woman. I think the way that the police spoke about it and the fact that they said like a post-pubescent individual kind of put teenager like a mind worm into everyone's head, and everyone thinks like, oh, it's a teenager, right? Because it's
Mm,
post-pubescent, and like right after puberty, you become a teenager, right? But it could also be a grown woman who's petite,
hmm.
and the more I watch the bike video, the more that I lean that way over a teenager.
I
Um,
just feel like I can barely detect a sort of a woman's outline with the hips and the tight-fitting clothing. But again, we know that people also disguise themselves when they go to do something like this. And so I want to be careful about how much I mentally commit myself to that because it really is pretty blurry. I mean, I think I said last time, the only thing I can tell is that it's not an enormous man. It could
right.
be a small man, it could be a small woman, it could be a teenager. My mind
And we
immediately,
know, from other cases with like mysterious video evidence that if you look at it long enough, you'll
yeah.
start seeing things that aren't necessarily there, or you'll start building a story around it,
Mhm.
based on other elements that kind of surround that video. So, jury's still out. Why an hour there? That's a great question.
Question of the moment for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. Did it take them an hour to
You could
get
look at
in?
it that if you're going to do something, if it is targeted and they know the person, say this is someone who knew Austin and there was a reason behind it, a personal reason, this was a targeted killing, then perhaps there was time trying to get up the guts to do it. You know, like, yes, oh, Miles, he already or she already rode there and was, prepared and everything, and you get that impetus. But I don't know. I've never snuck into someone's bedroom at night and stabbed them to death, so I don't know what that actually takes, from a courage point of view. But like getting there to the house and getting in the house, and we know, there was forced entry, so we know that took some time, and then perhaps there was a moment of like actually getting yourself to do it, could be, I don't know, but it's an interesting question because as we know, nothing was taken. There was no like it wasn't like drawers were pulled out and it looked like they were searching for something or anything like that. It wasn't a robbery. I mean, I think everyone agrees on that. So yeah, what was that hour spent doing other than the break-in, right?
Yeah, I'm picturing possibly like it taking a little bit of time to do the forced entry because we know that there was a forced entry. So that's some time. And then maybe the person hadn't been there and they had to spend some time quietly sort of figuring out the lay of the land. Here's how I'm going to leave when I'm done. Let me unlock that door maybe. Let's find where everybody is. Let's make sure there's no one else in the house. Like I could see if they had never been there and they weren't quite sure who was going to be home, they might want to take their really sweet time in figuring out what exactly was going to happen when they actually started committing this murder so they weren't surprised by someone's adult 20-year-old son across the hall waking up and coming and stopping them, right? It's like
Right.
there's things that could happen in that scenario where maybe the killer wouldn't count on it and they just wanted to be sure they knew what they were walking into. But I don't know. I think this is one of those things that's really hard to read the tea on because if it's a stranger, that all makes sense. If it's someone who had been in the house and knew Austin really well, then what were they doing there for an hour, right? You would think they didn't need to necessarily do all that. So it's a great question. I hope one day we get the answer to it because it's really weird. If
Yeah.
it's me, the last thing I'll say is if that was me, I would not want to be there for an hour. I would want to be in and out of there as fast as I could possibly do it because I'm committing a murder and I don't want to get caught, right? So it's
Right.
weird that they hung out for so long.
But you're a stoic, logical person.
Right. I
If you're
try.
a person that was more driven by emotion, and I'm just being
Mm.
devil's
Oh,
advocate,
that's a really good point. Yeah, yeah.
and you feel like you can do it, and then you get there and you're like having a little bit of a breakdown and like trying to make yourself ready to actually go and do this like incredibly heinous act,
Yeah,
you might have a different approach.
that
I
makes so
agree.
much
If I
sense.
if I had gotten myself to that point, I'm in and out. I'm getting it done.
But you're right. It's like armchair quarterbacking, right? It's like, I'll tell you what I would have done. If
Right.
I was on the field in that Super Bowl, I wouldn't have made that play. I would have tried to run the ball. It's like, yeah, but you weren't, and you don't know what it feels like because the
Right.
emotions are different, the pressure is different. So no, I'm glad you clocked that because you're right. On paper, it makes very little sense. But being in that person's head inside that dark house, waiting to do something that is life shattering and life altering for you and for the person you're about to hurt and the other people in the house. God knows what that feels like. You could sit there for an hour psyching yourself up, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, this next comment is from Coney A. I think this is our good friend Larry. What's up, Larry? So your question for us on this one is how old are the kids? Any girls, any boyfriends that may have had it out for the girlfriend's father? Sounds like if a kid, that is how they would get to and from. And then Mary, 1888, responded to him and said, at the time of his death, his two daughters were aged 11 and 14 years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, Larry, it's a good question. It's interesting that you're not the first one in this video to have raised it. It seems like a lot of people might be wondering about that. But sort of just to recap what we said last time, it doesn't seem like there's any evidence that the daughters had any sort of a negative relationship with either Mary or Austin, and that everything was pretty copacetic as far as that goes. And as far as, crazy young boyfriends and that kind of a thing, we have seen those stories too, but it doesn't seem like there's any evidence of it here. Not that it couldn't have happened, but we haven't heard anything about that from the people connected to the investigation.
Yeah. I have to say it is very interesting that we've had several comments, pointing to a kid and like sort of connecting the bike with this idea that it's a teenager, right? Or
Right.
a young person who's riding a bike because that's like the preferred way to get around, right? You don't have your driver's license yet. It's
That
it's
is
an
interesting.
interesting observation.
Yeah.
Chino Too Sweet. Hi Chino, thanks for the comment as always. The ex might have asked a young family member, maybe a young guy, if the suspect is a guy that she could have been messing around with or neighbor of hers. I heard you say the ex lived close by. With them being on a bike is why I think they might be involved with the ex. Also, do we know the relationship Austin had with his daughters? So that's interesting what you're talking about. Where did Kristen live? And we've shown this map, but it was fairly close by. And that is an interesting point about the bike, and perhaps that's somehow tied into where the ex-wife lived. Um, Do we know the relationship? Yeah, I mean, we do know the relationship. I mean, everything that we've heard is that Austin had a wonderful relationship with his daughters and that they were very happy living with him. And that Mary had taken on a role in their lives as well, even though, yes, they still had a relationship with their mother and, they did have some time over there. But from all accounts, it was a well-blended family, and Austin had a great relationship with his daughters. But yeah, everything you say here, Chino, is very, very interesting. I don't want to go too far down the road on that, but
All right, this next one is from Michelle 709113. I hope I said that right. We have to keep sharing and getting the word out to get justice for Austin. I'm looking forward to the next two episodes. I have lots of thoughts and lots of questions. Has the X been cleared? Praying for resolution for this family. Michelle, thanks so much for that comment. Yeah, I'm excited for everybody to see the next two episodes about Austin, which will be our interviews with his family. Um, Let's see, lots of thoughts and lots of questions. Us too, and I hope you guys keep them coming in these comments so we can, continue to do these videos where we read them and talk about them. That's one of the most valuable things we can do in these cases, I think, is have our thoughts aired out, discussed in public, and that's the purpose of crowdsourcing, right? So the big thing I feel like you're saying here is, has the X been cleared? To our knowledge, the only person that the police have bothered to publicly come out and make a statement about being cleared is Mary, who is Austin's current wife, who was in bed with him when he was attacked. They have not said anything about his ex-wife. They have not said anything that we know of about any other particular person, other than certain parts of his life have been looked into and don't appear to be involved, right? So when they said, yes, we looked at his workplace, we can't find anything there, they didn't release a press release with every single person's name that they cleared from that dealership. They just said, doesn't seem to be like that's the place. We're still looking, obviously. The one person here that they definitively said we know is not involved in this is Mary. So yes, the ex Maybe we'll get that one day, maybe we won't. But it is interesting to note that they have not said anything about that.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it at that, right? Listen, you guys, I have to say the response to just the one video that we've put out on Austin's case so far, response has been overwhelming. I keep saying that, but it's like I think I just have to get used to the fact that we're getting decent numbers now, Sean. Like I'm
Right.
like it's mind blowing, and it's
Yeah,
like
it feels mind
it's
blowing for two guys who weren't doing this a
yeah,
year ago.
it's a Friday, we
Yeah.
did all right. But no, it's just the interest that I think we're seeing in it. Not, obviously, like I know I dropped a lot of links, on social media and some of the Facebook groups and stuff, and I know that Richard, Austin's brother-in-law, who we did an interview with that you guys will see in a couple of weeks, he's been promoting it as well through the dedicated Facebook group on Facebook, for Austin. So, there's definitely like support coming in from outside, but obviously there's a lot of people that watch us regularly that are just finding this a really interesting case and want to see justice served. So thank you guys for doing that. Like we said up top, we do have a membership option now, so if you want to help us out, you want to buy us a cup of coffee, you want to buy us a sandwich while we're editing these videos, while Sean's editing these videos, I should say, while I'm in England, eating a curry and drinking some tea. But we would really appreciate it. We love you guys and we love the support that we get from you, and we're going to keep doing this. Don't forget, go subscribe to the podcast as well. Hit the notifications bell so you know when these next interviews are coming up. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. It helps us so much in the algorithm. Really helps YouTube sort of push these videos up to the top and suggest them to other people so more and more people see these stories, more and more people are talking about these cases and keeping them alive, because that's why we're doing this.
Right on. Thank you guys so much. And we look forward to bringing you more on Austin and many more cases after that. So until next time, we'll see you in the comments.
Thanks, everybody.